Mia had lived on the hill her entire life, in a small wooden house with her father. The house overlooked a dense forest that stretched for miles, its thick canopy hiding secrets she longed to discover. But for Mia, the forest remained just out of reach. Confined to a wheelchair since childhood, her world was limited to the hilltop and the narrow pathways her father had carved around their home. She often sat by her window, watching birds dart between the towering trees, listening to the rustling leaves that whispered stories she couldn't quite hear. Villagers spoke of an unseen guardian living in the woods, a great beast that protected the land. Mia was both curious and skeptical, but more than anything, she wanted to experience the forest for herself. Her father, a carpenter, was protective of her. "The forest is no place for a girl in a wheelchair," he would say, shaking his head. But Mia dreamed of more. She imagined herself wheeling through the trees, touching their rough bark, breathing in the damp earth. She had heard the villagers' tales of the bear, an enormous creature said to roam the woods, watching over the land. No one had seen it up close, only glimpses of a massive shadow moving between the trees. One golden afternoon, curiosity got the better of her. She wheeled herself along the dirt path that ran behind their house, closer and closer to the slope that separated her from the forest below. The ground slanted downward and she hesitated. The urge to see what lay beyond pulled at her, so she inched forward. But the earth was loose, and before she could react, her wheels slipped. Mia's breath caught in her throat as her chair lurched forward. She grabbed at the wheels, trying to slow her descent, but it was too late. The chair tumbled, sending her sprawling onto the forest floor. The world spun, twigs snapped beneath her, and then silence. Pain pricked her palms as she pushed herself up, her chair lying a few feet away, one wheel bent at an odd angle. Panic surged in her chest. How would she get back up the hill? Her father wouldn't be home for hours. She was alone, or so she thought. A low rustling in the bushes made her freeze. Something was watching her. Mia's heartbeat pounded in her ears as a shadow moved between the trees. A bear. It was massive, its dark fur blending with the dimming forest light. She had never seen a creature so large, so powerful. Her breath hitched as it stepped closer. She braced herself for the worst. But instead of charging, the bear stopped a few feet away, tilting its head as if studying her. Mia held her breath. The bear sniffed the air and then did something completely unexpected. It nudged her wheelchair upright with a gentle push of its nose. Mia stared, unable to believe what she was seeing. The bear, this wild and formidable creature, was helping her. Slowly, carefully, she reached out, her fingers trembling as they grazed his thick fur. The bear didn't pull away. Instead, it huffed softly, stepping beside her. Summoning her courage, Mia pulled herself toward the chair. The bear watched, its massive body still as stone. When she struggled, it stepped closer, allowing her to lean against it for support. Mia sat frozen, staring at the enormous creature before her. Every survival instinct screamed at her to stay still, to avoid making any sudden moves. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the bear could hear it. Yet despite its massive size and piercing dark eyes, the bear didn't seem threatening. Its breath came in slow, warm puffs, misting in the cool air between them. It tilted its head slightly, as if studying her, its ears twitching to the distant sounds of the forest. Mia's fear slowly ebbed as she noticed something. There was no aggression in its posture, no growl, no baring of teeth. Instead, the bear took a step closer, sniffing the air, then turned its attention to her overturned wheelchair. With an almost deliberate motion, it nudged the chair upright with its powerful nose. Mia let out a shaky breath, barely believing what she was seeing. She hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Her legs, useless beneath her, made it impossible to stand up on her own. She shifted, trying to move toward her chair, but her arms felt weak and unsteady. As if sensing her struggle, the bear took another step closer, its immense body mere inches from her. Cautiously, Mia reached out and placed her hand on its thick fur. It was coarse yet warm, vibrating with the powerful rhythm of the bear's breathing. The bear remained still, allowing her to lean against it. Summoning her strength, Mia gripped her chair with one hand and, using the bear for balance, pulled herself up. With one final push, she settled into her seat. She exhaled in relief and looked at the bear, which regarded her with quiet curiosity. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The bear let out a low, rumbling huff before turning away, vanishing into the trees as silently as it had appeared. Mia sat there for a long moment, her fingers still tingling from the sensation of the bear's fur. The experience had been surreal, almost magical. As she finally made her way back home, a thought lingered in her mind. She had to see the bear again. Mia couldn't stop thinking about the bear. The next day, she found herself staring out the window, her eyes fixed on the tree line, hoping to catch a glimpse of her rescuer. As days passed, her curiosity grew into something deeper, a longing to return. One afternoon, when her father left for the village, Mia made her move. She wheeled herself carefully down the same slope, this time avoiding the loose earth that had caused her accident. She maneuvered cautiously but with determination, the thrill of adventure coursing through her veins. The forest welcomed her with rustling leaves and birdsong. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting golden patterns on the forest floor. She moved slowly, taking in the sights and sounds, marveling at the towering trees and the scent of damp earth. It felt like stepping into another world, one untouched by time. Mia followed a narrow path, tracing the route she had tumbled down days before. She reached a clearing where she spotted deep indentations in the soil, paw prints, large and unmistakable. Her heart leaped. The bear had been here. For the next several days, Mia continued sneaking into the forest, each time exploring a little further. She discovered hidden trails, small brooks where the water ran crystal clear, and patches of wildflowers that looked like something out of a fairy tale. She encountered other animals too, a family of deer grazing in the distance, squirrels chattering overhead, and once even a fox watching her curiously before darting away. But it was the bear she searched for the most. One afternoon, as she paused near a large oak tree, she felt a presence behind her. Slowly she turned, and there it was. The bear stood a few feet away, watching her with quiet intensity. Mia held her breath. Then, gathering her courage, she spoke softly. "Hello again." The bear let out a small grunt. Then, to her astonishment, settled onto the ground, resting its massive body against the tree. A smile spread across Mia's face. She didn't know why the bear had chosen to help her that day, nor why it seemed unafraid of her now, but she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Acceptance. The bear wasn't just a creature of the wild. It was a guardian of the forest, and somehow it had chosen to trust her. With each passing day, Mia grew bolder. She learned to navigate the uneven forest paths with greater ease, finding ways to maneuver her wheelchair over roots and rocks. She memorized the trails, knowing where the ground was firm and where it was treacherous. The forest, once an untouchable dream, had become her sanctuary, and the bear, her silent companion, was always nearby. Sometimes it watched her from a distance. Other times it walked alongside her, its heavy footsteps blending with the rhythm of the woods. It never threatened her, never acted as anything other than a gentle presence. But back home, her father was growing suspicious. "You've been outside more than usual," he remarked one evening as they ate dinner. "Where do you go?" Mia hesitated, then shrugged. "Just around the house." Her father's brow furrowed. "Be careful, Mia. The forest is dangerous. I don't want you getting hurt." She nodded, but inside she knew she could never give up the forest. It had become a part of her. And the bear, a friend she couldn't explain. Then one evening, a storm rolled in. The sky darkened, and the wind howled through the trees. Mia, unable to resist, ventured out just as the first raindrops fell. She wanted to see the forest in the storm, to feel its wild energy. But the rain quickly turned into a downpour, the ground turning slick beneath her wheels. Lightning flashed, illuminating the trees in eerie light. A sudden gust of wind sent a branch crashing down nearby, making Mia gasp. Panic set in as she realized the trail had become treacherous. Her wheels stuck in the mud, refusing to move. She struggled, her hands slipping as she tried to gain traction. Then out of the rain-drenched darkness, the bear appeared. It moved swiftly to her side, pressing its powerful body against her chair. With a firm, steady motion, it nudged her forward, helping her break free from the muck. Mia clung to the armrests, letting the bear guide her to safety. By the time they reached the clearing, the rain had lessened, though thunder still rumbled in the distance. Mia turned to the bear, breathless. "You saved me again!" The bear huffed, shaking the water from its fur. Mia reached out, running her fingers through its wet coat. "I think you're my guardian after all." For the first time she saw it clearly, not just a wild beast, but a protector, a friend, and she knew, no matter what, she would always return to the forest. Days turned into weeks, and Mia's secret adventures into the forest became the highlight of her days. Every morning, she longed for the moment she could slip away, tracing the hidden trails she had discovered, feeling the cool embrace of the towering trees. The bear was always nearby, watching over her. She no longer feared him. In fact, she welcomed his quiet presence. Their bond had grown beyond simple curiosity. It was trust, an unspoken understanding between two souls who didn't quite fit in their respective worlds. She marveled at the beauty of the forest, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting golden patterns on the earth. She met other creatures too, timid deer that darted between the trees, mischievous squirrels that chattered from the branches, and birds that sang melodies that felt like whispers of an ancient secret. This place, with all its magic and life, had become her sanctuary. But her joy was short-lived. One evening, as Mia rolled through the village square with her father, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. A group of men stood outside the general store, speaking in low, serious tones. "They say the land beyond the hill is prime for development," one of them said. "If we clear out some of that forest, we can set up new cabins, maybe even a road leading up there." "And what about the wildlife?" Another voice chimed in. "The bears and deer will move elsewhere," the first man replied dismissively. "It's just business. We can't let sentiment get in the way of progress." Mia's heart pounded. They were talking about the forest, her forest, the bear's home. She clutched the arms of her wheelchair, her mind racing. If they moved forward with their plans, the trees would be cut down, the land stripped bare. The places she had come to love, the sun-dappled clearing where she met the bear, the winding paths she had memorized, the hidden wonders of the deep woods, would be gone forever. And more than that, the bear would lose his home. Would he be forced to flee? Would he be hunted? Panic gripped her. She knew she had to act. She couldn't let them take away the place that had given her so much hope. But what could a girl in a wheelchair do? The thought of speaking up terrified her, but the idea of losing the forest was unbearable. That night, she tossed and turned in bed, her mind spinning with possibilities. She thought about her father. He had always taught her to stand up for what was right. But would he understand? She thought about the villagers. Some of them might care about the forest, but would they listen to her? Most of all, she thought about the bear, the way he had saved her, the way he had watched over her, as if he knew she needed him. Now it was her turn to protect him. The next morning, determination burned in her chest. She had to make the villagers see what she saw. The forest was not just land waiting to be cleared. It was alive, full of beauty and stories and creatures that had nowhere else to go. But where would she begin? Mia spent the day thinking of a plan. Simply begging the villagers to stop wouldn't be enough. She needed proof, proof that the forest was worth saving. That evening, she ventured into the woods again, this time with a small notebook in her lap. She documented everything: the towering trees, the fresh scent of pine, the way the sunlight danced between the leaves. She sketched the birds, the deer, even the delicate wildflowers that bloomed along the trails. She wrote about the bear, not about their friendship. She knew no one would believe that, but about his presence, his importance to the balance of the forest. As the days passed, her notebook filled with observations, drawings, and even stories from the villagers who had grown up hearing the legend of the great guardian of the woods. Some spoke of moments when they, too, had felt watched but never threatened. Others shared tales passed down from their grandparents. Stories of a bear who had roamed these lands for generations, keeping the forest safe. Mia knew she had something powerful now, but would it be enough? The real challenge came when she had to face the village council. Her father noticed the shift in her demeanor, the way she spent her evenings scribbling in her notebook, the way she no longer seemed content just watching the forest from afar. One evening, he finally asked, "Mia, what's going on?" "You've been distracted lately." She hesitated but knew she couldn't keep it from him any longer. Taking a deep breath, she told him everything. About the bear, about her adventures in the forest, about the threat looming over the land. She expected him to be angry, to forbid her from ever going back. But instead, he was silent for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he sighed and said, "I always knew you had a strong heart, Mia. If this is what you believe in, then I'll stand by you." The next day, with her father by her side, Mia rolled into the village hall, where the council meeting was already in session. The developers were there, discussing their plans with excitement, drawings of cabins, roads, and clear-cut lands spread across the table. Mia swallowed her nerves and spoke. She told them about the forest, not just as a patch of trees, but as a home for wildlife, a refuge for those seeking peace, a place of mystery and wonder. She showed them her notebook, passing it around so they could see the intricate sketches, the detailed notes, the history woven into the land. The room was silent as she spoke. Some of the council members exchanged glances. Others leaned forward, studying her drawings. And then, to her shock, one of the older members of the council, a man who had lived in the village his whole life, cleared his throat and said, "I remember my grandfather telling me about that bear. I always thought it was just a story. But maybe it's more than that." The conversation shifted. The excitement about the cabins faded. People began to talk about preservation, about what the forest meant to them, about the responsibility they had to protect it. By the time the meeting ended, no final decision had been made. But Mia had done something important. She had made them see. She had planted the seed of doubt in their plans, made them question whether progress was worth the cost. That night, as she returned home, she felt lighter than she had in days. The fight wasn't over, but she had taken the first step. And as she sat by her window, looking out toward the dark silhouette of the forest, she imagined the bear was watching too, knowing she was fighting for him. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel powerless. Determined, Mia spoke to her father. She sat across from him at the dinner table, her hands clenched into fists on her lap. "We can't let them destroy the forest," she pleaded. Her father sighed, setting down his fork. "Mia, I understand you love that place, but the village needs progress. More cabins, more roads. It means more jobs, better trade. We can't stop change." Mia shook her head, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "This isn't just about progress. It's about destroying something irreplaceable. That forest is alive. It's full of history, and it's home to creatures that won't have anywhere else to go. You always taught me to do what's right. This is right." Her father studied her, his expression torn. He had always been practical, always looked at what would benefit the community the most. But now, looking at his daughter, his little girl who had spent so much of her life feeling powerless, he saw something new. A fire in her eyes, a strength he hadn't realized had been there all along. Still, he hesitated. "Even if I agree with you, what can we do? The developers have already started making plans. The council is leaning in their favor." Mia straightened in her wheelchair, determination hardening her voice. "Then I'll make them see what they're destroying." She knew she couldn't do it alone. So the next day, Mia began speaking to the villagers, one by one. She rolled through the marketplace, stopping people she knew, shopkeepers, teachers, even the children who played in the square. She told them about the forest, describing the towering trees, the hidden trails, the creatures that called it home. She spoke of the bear, not as a monster, but as a guardian. At first, many were skeptical. "Bears are dangerous," one old man muttered. "You were just lucky it didn't hurt you." "But it didn't," Mia countered. "It saved me. It could have left me there, scared and alone, but it didn't." "Doesn't that mean something?" Some villagers shook their heads, unwilling to believe. Others, however, listened. One woman, an elder who had lived in the village for decades, nodded thoughtfully. "There have always been stories about a bear watching over these woods. Maybe there's truth to them." Encouraged, Mia continued. She shared her sketches and notes, showing them the beauty of the untouched wilderness. "If we let them tear it down, it won't come back," she told them. "Do you really want to live in a place where the forest is just a memory?" Slowly, her passion began to ignite something in them. A few villagers started to agree. then a few more. Before long, Mia had gathered a small group of supporters, people who saw what she saw, who understood what would be lost if the forest was destroyed. But words weren't enough. They needed action. One evening, Mia and her supporters gathered in the town hall. "We need to show the council that we won't stand by and watch this happen," she said. "We need to make our voices heard." A petition was formed. People signed their names, adding their voices to Mia's cause. Some of the children even drew pictures of the forest and the animals that lived there, hoping to sway the adults with their innocence. Then came the protests. It started with just a handful of people standing outside the council building, holding signs that read, "Save our forest and protect our home." But as the days passed, more and more villagers joined in. Even those who had once been skeptical began to have second thoughts. Local officials took notice. The developers who had once assumed the village would accept their plans without protest were now facing resistance. Mia, who had once been the girl who watched the world from her window, now stood at the front of the movement. She spoke to the crowd with confidence, her voice no longer small or uncertain. "We are not just fighting for the forest," she declared. "We are fighting for our home, for our history, for the future. If we don't stop this now, what will be next? How much more will we lose?" Her words resonated. The villagers, seeing her strength, felt their own resolve harden. But the fight was far from over. One afternoon, a meeting was called at the village hall. The council members sat at the front of the room, their faces serious. The developers stood beside them, their polished suits a stark contrast to the villagers' worn clothes. Mia rolled forward, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. One of the developers, a man with sharp eyes and a confident smirk, spoke first. "We understand that change can be difficult," he said smoothly. "But this project is for the good of the village. Think of the new jobs, the improved economy." Mia lifted her chin. "And what about the cost? Not just in money, but in what we'll lose." The developer smiled condescendingly. "Young lady, you're very passionate, but progress, this isn't just about progress," she interrupted, her voice strong. "This is about respect. Respect for the land, for the creatures that live in it, for the history of this place. You say this is for the good of the village. But what happens when the forest is gone? When the animals disappear? When the air isn't as clean? When the village loses what makes it special?" The room fell silent. The council members exchanged glances. Then one of the older members, the same man who had once dismissed her concerns, cleared his throat. "Mia, what do you propose?" Hope flickered in her chest. "We make the forest a protected area," she said. "Instead of destroying it, we embrace it. We could create guided nature trails, teach people about the wildlife, even attract visitors who want to experience something real, something untouched." There were murmurs in the room. Some still looked doubtful, but others were nodding. The decision wasn't made that night, but the seed had been planted. The developers, seeing the growing opposition, knew they had lost the village's trust. The council agreed to hold another vote, this time with more voices being heard. Mia left the meeting feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That night, as she sat by her window, she thought of the bear. She had stood up for him, just as he had once stood by her. And for the first time, she felt truly powerful. As the pressure mounted, the land developers pulled back. The protests, the petitions, and the overwhelming unity of the village had proven too much to ignore. They withdrew their plans, citing unforeseen resistance as the reason for their retreat. The news spread quickly through the village, and with it came an overwhelming sense of relief. People cheered in the streets, exchanging hugs and handshakes. The forest, their forest, was safe, for now at least. Mia sat in her wheelchair near the town square, watching the celebration unfold around her. A part of her wanted to join in, to bask in the joy of victory, but another part of her felt a quiet, reflective peace. She had fought for something bigger than herself. She had found her voice, and now she had to come to terms with another truth, one that settled deep in her heart like a bittersweet melody. The bear belonged to the wild. Over the past few weeks, she had seen it less and less. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence, that maybe their encounters would return to how they once were. But as the days stretched on, she realized the truth. The bear had been watching over her when she needed it most. It had given her the courage to believe in herself. And now that she had found that strength within, it was time for her to stand on her own. That thought sat heavily in her chest, a lump forming in her throat. She had always known the bear wasn't truly hers to keep, but knowing it and accepting it were two different things. One morning, as the first light of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, Mia made her way back to the forest's edge. The air was crisp, carrying the familiar scent of pine and earth. Her hands gripped the wheels of her chair tightly, her heart pounding with quiet anticipation. Would the bear come, or had it already moved on? She waited, her breath slow and steady. The wind rustled through the trees, whispering secrets she could not understand. And then, just as she was about to turn back, a shadow moved between the trees. Mia's breath caught in her throat. There, standing tall among the ancient oaks, was the bear. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They simply stared at each other, locked in a silent exchange that words could never capture. The bear's dark eyes held no fear, no hesitation, only a quiet understanding. Mia swallowed the lump in her throat and whispered, "Thank you." The bear let out a soft huff, the sound low and almost reassuring. It took a step back, then another. And then, with a final lingering glance, it turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Mia watched until it was completely gone, her chest tight with emotion. She should have been sad, but instead she felt something else. Gratitude. This wasn't an ending. The bear had given her something she would carry with her forever. She turned her wheelchair around and made her way back home, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. No longer just a girl on a hill, but a protector of the world beyond it. In the days that followed, Mia found herself changed in ways she hadn't expected. The once quiet girl who had watched life from the sidelines was now at the heart of her community. People came to her for advice, to share their ideas on how to keep the village and the forest coexisting in harmony. She became a voice for conservation, working with others to ensure the forest remained protected for future generations. She no longer felt small or powerless. She had faced something greater than herself and had stood her ground. One afternoon, as she sat outside her home, her father joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. Mia smiled. "I had a good teacher," she replied, looking toward the trees in the distance. Her father followed her gaze. "The bear?" She nodded. "It showed me I was stronger than I ever believed." Her father was quiet for a moment before squeezing her shoulder gently. "I think you've always been strong, Mia. You just needed to see it for yourself." She let his words settle deep within her, knowing them to be true. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Mia wheeled herself to the top of the hill near her home. The view stretched out before her, the forest standing tall and unbroken. A warm breeze rustled through the grass, carrying with it the distant sounds of birds calling to each other. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the presence of the bear even in its absence. It was out there, somewhere, living the life it was meant to live. And so was she.